Well, welcome back, everybody, to our podcast, the Dean and Kate podcast, as we become known as, still unnamed. We are now on Spotify, Apple, or iTunes, and Google Play. Super stoked. So we're excited. We're excited to get started again on our podcast. Thank you, everybody that's listening, following, sharing, and encouraging others to listen in to us. As again, we always say at the beginning of our podcast, our opinions are of our own. And they come from years and years of experience in the industry of mental health and treatment and working with those individuals, but also mainly in the personal development vein. So if you disagree or dislike what we've said, please feel free to comment as long as it's appropriate. We always love dialogue. And otherwise, you don't have to listen.
That is the brilliance and beauty in podcasting,
that's the
right?
beautiful podcasting. If you don't like it, just go to another podcast.
Right, just choose somebody different to listen to. There's lots out there.
There's so much out there. So as we have joined our voices to the chorus of podcasting and media, our intention is to really bring light and shed light on what we feel is kind of the misconceptions of the mind, or and in kind of more vulgar terms, the mind effing that we have been getting through the years, believing that things are a certain way when they're actually different.
Right.
So today's topic is very much on that point.
Well, and it's very relevant, I feel, in our day and age today. In 2020, it's very much just rampant in everything that we see and everything that's presented to us. So I'm really excited to dive into it and have a conversation with you about it, Mr. Nixon.
Well, I'm excited for the conversation as well. Yeah, so tonight today, it's night, okay?
It is.
So it's night for us.
6:35
It's only
PM.
6:35. It's bright as can be because it's July. But it is one of those situations where truth, and this is the one thing I kind of want to use this as our jumping off, our starting point, I should say. And so one of my favorite people in life is my mentor, one of the people that I follow very, very closely in his work and in his path. I would love to say in his footsteps, but there's no way on earth I could ever step remotely close to his footsteps. And that's Mahatma Gandhi. And, the idea of me calling him my guru would be abhorrent to him in considering he himself, being of the Hindu religion, didn't even believe in having a guru himself. So I can't call him a guru because I don't want to make him mad.
You don't want to offend
I don't want
Gandhi.
to offend him at this point. Anyway, so Gandhi was one of the most impactful people on me in my personal development journey. I've had a lot of them. And as I've had, James Allen has really impacted me. So many of them. James Allen was one of the first one to really turn my head in the book As a Man Thinketh. Right. I just think everybody should start there.
And by turn your head, do you mean like catch your attention?
Yes. Like he was the first person. Like I'd been in the treatment industry for a period of time. I was really diving in. This was 21 years ago, 22 years ago. I was really diving into the personal development a lot more hardcore than I had been up until that point. My career started in 1990, so this was about 9 or 10 years in, and I'm reading the As a Man Thinketh, and he was the first one that got my attention to go, holy Hannah, this is a really cool direction to take my mind.
Yes, brilliant writing.
Really good stuff. And Mahatma Gandhi was my next big read, and reading his autobiography, the thing that I loved about Gandhi was he talked about his purpose in life was the quest of truth, the search for truth. And that's all he really was after, was the search of truth. He wanted to understand truth, find it, and then live according to it, if that makes sense. And so when he was moving along this path, I'm like in, because like everyone out there, I'm looking for truth.
Yes.
And So the powerful part about it to me was as he started kind of digesting it and pulling it apart and everything that he went through, which I hope people read him. What I learned was that he was saying is truth is a perception. Truth is perceptual. Mm-hmm. And we've had this conversation before in other podcasts, and we'll probably have it many more times. But truth is a perception. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to kind of, as our talking point, is like, I want to do kind of the devil's advocate I've done in the past is I want to throw out there is that the idea that somebody's right. And somebody's wrong, and it's probably you.
That's your hypothesis.
There you go, listener.
Somebody's right and somebody's wrong, and the person that's wrong
is you. So, listener, you're wrong. And the reason I say that is...
Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
As they turn to the next podcast. And the reason I say that is because that's the one thing everybody's afraid of.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like, we're all afraid of being wrong, and you're afraid of being told you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm throwing that out there right up front is, you're wrong.
Right. And, like, even another layer to that is to be proven wrong. Right.
Oh, that sucks.
That's even worse than just like, oh, yeah, you're wrong. Like, oh, yeah, whatever, prove it. And then they prove you wrong, and you're like, dang it.
Dang it. I am inaccurate. I won't even say I'm wrong. I'll just say I'm inaccurate.
Oh, and I love that you brought up the fact that truth is perceptual, right? Like, and we have talked about this often. I know mostly probably on Monday Night Live, where we talk about communication and people being on either side of a subject and being like, no, it's this thing, and then the person with the different perspective is like,
well, yeah,
no,
use your example. You always throw.
Yeah, so it's my favorite way to look at it is if you're standing across from somebody and you are looking at a 6 on the at your feet on the floor on below the you, they're on the other side of that and they're looking at it and it's a 9 for them, right? And both are correct from your standpoint, from your perspective, from where it is that you're looking. It takes a very brave person to walk around the 6 or the 9 and take a look at it from that other perspective, I think. And that's oftentimes where we kind of come in at this angle is in communication and in relationship building to be able to, get down off of the, no, I'm right and you're wrong, and be able to try to see things from their other perspective.
Yeah.
However, tonight, I love that we're tackling this idea of truth. I would really like to dive into how to find it, and I love that you brought in Gandhi, and we can talk about his journey, as well as to be a seeker of truth, because I feel so passionately strong these days that we are fed and, for lack of a better word, because it is exactly what it is, programmed to believe that things are a certain way when they are not necessarily that way. And that is the whole point of the podcast, is to be able to start stripping down some of those misconceptions of the mind. And I think truth is, like, this probably should have been our very first podcast because it's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
And that's, as I listen and think about all the people that are listening in, hopefully, and really kind of catching that that idea of things that, yeah, I'm always afraid of being wrong. Mm-hmm. The reason people are offended, like, let's be straight, the only reason people are offended by anything is because it's a reinforcement on some level that they are wrong or they're bad.
Right. I would completely agree.
So if somebody comes at me and starts giving me grief about certain things that have emotionally bothered me, or things that I've been traumatized or wounded by, and have these false beliefs now about who I am because I'm believing more in this world I see than the world I feel. Mm-hmm. And so then I get offended. And I think about that a lot. Like, all the times that I get offended, I always have to step back and go, what part of me is being offended right now?
Oh, yeah. Brilliant.
What part of me is being offended? Mm-hmm. And the majority of the time, it's my ego.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's my ego, because I'm offended because somebody's telling me, yeah, you're right. This whole time, you're a piece of shit, just like, so-and-so said you were, and so-and-so, you're not going to be anything, and you're not da-da-da-da-da. And so then I get all hurt and I get offended.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think when we as communicators, and I don't want to turn it into a communication diatribe, but when we get into these conversations about communication, and it's about finding a way to say things without being, too opinionated. So you're not coming across with your opinion, you're coming across with your thoughts and feelings. And I think people get confused by that. They think that because it's somebody's opinion, it's the truth. And it's because we're afraid of other people's opinions. We're afraid of what they think of us and what they feel about us, because we're more concerned about what they think and feel about us than what we know to be true, right?
Yes.
So we get caught up in this, oh, God, their opinion of me is that I'm this or I'm that, when it's nothing more than an opinion or a view, like you were talking about, the 6 or the 9. And because that individual sees it as a 6 and I see it as a 9, that's their opinion. But man, we sure get bent out of shape.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Over that. And then the other thing we do is that, well, so-and-so said it's true, so it must be true. And then we truly, as you put it earlier, we don't know who to believe. We don't know what to believe anymore. And we're living in 2020. We've talked about this a couple times already in our podcast, and it's going around everywhere. 2020 vision, looking back,
yes.
Hindsight's 2020, all the cliches. The interesting thing about this year is the view that we are getting, right? So we're coming into the end of July. So we are at the 27th today.
Right.
There's your timestamp, 27th of July. And the intriguing thing to me is what has happened since January 1st to July 27th has been dramatic, like dramatic. And there's so many opinions out there.
Oh, it's cacophonous. There's so many opinions. It's like not even in any sort of the like musical world, right? Like you can have different instruments playing and have a beautiful symphony happen, right? But this is just chaos and cacophony. Like there is just loudness and just craziness. You can't orchestrate anything out of it.
Right. And there's no way to navigate it. And so what happens is we're starting to divide up, and this is the part that's so scary to me, is we're starting to divide up into camps almost. Yes. And it's forcing people to do it. Like you are forced to go into a camp. So, I think about like these little towers, and just think about yourself in this giant group of mass of people. And then you get these people building these giant platforms, and then they're standing on top of their platforms shouting. And so you're turning around and you're facing these different platforms trying to somehow figure out who to listen to. And what I find is a lot of people are following the popular voices. So you'll get this giant platform built, and then you'll get mini platforms built around that platform and other stages, and it turns into this show. And then you've got this big giant, loud thing going on, and everybody's going to gravitate to that because there's different ways of saying things. There's different, people saying it. And there's a lot of, now you've taken one voice and then you put popular people around that voice, and so now it becomes the moral majority, and it becomes the, quote, right stance. And then you've got
love that you brought that word moral into it.
Yeah.
Because typically with like giant expressions like that, there's an agenda. It's not moral driven. Like there's no moral. It's a dollar driven experience.
Yes.
Or I mean, let's be honest.
That's the part that's intriguing to me, is how people call it the moral majority, or the morals, and reality is it's not. It starts with an M, but it's not morals.
Money.
Money majority.
Yes.
Agreed. And then you get these smaller platforms, and people are gravitating to the smaller platforms, and they may have, other platforms and stages and whatnot around them. But it really, the part that I loved about the way Gandhi lived his life is he never went or gravitated to a platform. He never did. He found a hill, metaphorically, that he could stand on, listen, and observe, and discern what was true and what was real. And that's the part I think that we've got to learn how to do in our world today. And there's, you're getting on these big giant platforms of mainstream media, and that is a giant platform.
Oh my goodness.
And I will tell you, dear listener, when you sit that old analogy I brought up several times, that the right wing and the left wing are of the same bird.
Yes.
People, wake up. The right wing and the left wing, they're the same people. They're doing the same thing. There is an agenda being driven here. Mm-hmm. And I know this sounds almost borderline conspiracy theorist, but I'm 55 freaking years old, mm-hmm. and I've lived long enough to know that we're being given a narrative, and they're telling us the left narrative, and they're telling us the right narrative. They're telling you both narratives. Right. And they're driving both narratives. And I guarantee you that they're sitting down trying to figure out how to keep that narrative going. Well, the only way to keep one narrative going is to create an opposite narrative.
Yep.
Now, this is a truth. Everything in life requires an equal and opposite. Mm-hmm. Everything in life has its equal and opposite. Nature creates balance and equal and opposite. So if I want to keep anything moving forward, so if I take a top and I spin that top and I set it out and I want it to keep spinning, that means that I have to create equal amount of force around the whole outward circle of that top.
To keep it moving.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And on a gyroscope, I can take two orbs and they've got to be equal shape and size, and I can get those spinning, and if they're equal shape and size, then they are going to keep that moving forward. Mm-hmm. I'm talking to you about the left and the right.
Yes.
The left is governing the right, and the right is governing the left. You can't tell me they're not collaborating on the narrative. They're telling each other what they're going to be putting out so that they can create the same amount of hysteria, anxiety, mm-hmm. drama around. They support each other. And the more that we try and figure, well, I'm going to lean more this way, the more we become a part of the problem. The more we lean another way, the more we become a part of the problem. But this idea of finding a hill to stand on,
yep.
to be able to separate yourself from it, to be able to step aside from it and stand with an observation point and discern the truth for yourself, people, dear listener, praise God you're listening. Mm-hmm. Because at some point you have to start making these decisions on your own as to what you believe to be true and what you know as truth. And that's got to be the beginning of all of this, because the only thing that's keeping you from doing this is you're afraid of being told you're
wrong.
Yep,
absolutely.
And that's the only reason that you're going to feed in to the media, and if they say something that offends you, you're going to swing over to the right. Mm-hmm. If they say something to offend you, you're going to swing over to the left. And if you don't think that they know what they're doing, then ask yourself what set you off yesterday on Instagram or Facebook or any of these other social medias. Mm-hmm. Ask yourself what set you off, and then ask yourself what way did it send you, to the left or to the right, and then tell yourself, look yourself in the mirror and try and pretend you're not getting played.
Yeah. Because you're going to find pretty quickly that you are. And I love that you brought up that bit of Gandhi about just going for higher ground, right? Like the idea of taking a broader scope and taking things in. So I kind of want to move this into the way that we get pulled either one way or another, right? And we're kind of like alluding to some political stuff here, but this happens in all things, right? Like
familial.
Yep.
Religious.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Keep going.
Yeah, familial, religion, medical, weight loss.
Yep. Anything you can have an opinion about.
Yeah.
There's going to be
anything that can be, and even more than that, anything that can be monetized.
Yes, of course, absolutely. So either there's going to be a competition in trying to win your dollar, and or something that you would be able to once again put your stake next to somebody else's stake, right? And be like, no, this is my platform right here. Which, by the way, I am not trying to discredit your passions and things that you love and that drive you. We're simply going after how to actually figure out what is true in this cacophonous arena of just noise everywhere, right? To actually be able to see the picture and what is going on for what it actually is, to find out what the heck the number on the ground really is, right? And so, Dean, you've kind of thrown out the word discernment a couple of times already in our conversation tonight. And so I want to go to one side of how we can really start to zero in on what is true. And I would even say, listener, true for you, right? Because sometimes there is that perspective.
Well, and like we've said, you don't have to agree with what we're saying.
Absolutely.
But if anything that we're saying matters a little bit of truth, then hang on to that.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's start with the emotional side of things. Is that chill for you to do that? So for me, a lot of what can get really confusing oftentimes when looking for what is true is because I tend to be more of an emotionally driven person. So I guess this is the reason that I chose emotion first, right? It's something that is pretty real and tangible in my life. I often feel something before I'll have kind of that logical stance that will come in, right, to try to figure out what it is that's going on. And so I feel with that emotional piece, I know that is a tactic that platforms use in order to grow their ranks and to push their agendas and try to make it seem as if whatever it is that they are rallying behind is good and true and what everybody should get behind. When oftentimes or sometimes that may not be the case, right? It might just be, and this is kind of where you need to start bringing in all these pieces that we're going to be talking about tonight. It might just be a way to be able to herd a lot more people into their pocket, right? Yeah. And so anything for me lately, anything that just really gets a big emotional reaction for me is kind of a good clue or a flag raise, like I like to call it, right? Like it's just like, hey, pay attention over here. This might be an area in which you need to do some looking, because obviously I've had an emotional reaction to it. And I love how you brought in, Dean, that when things trigger you, for lack of a better word, right? When we have that emotional response, like you were saying, like just go think about what set you off yesterday when you were looking at Facebook or Instagram. Like when you have that experience, then that emotion gets risen in you. You have some sort of attachment to whatever is going on. Exactly. Or else you wouldn't even, like you would just keep scrolling. Like It would be a non-issue for you. It has either put a mirror up to you to show you, like you said, like all the places that you're like, oh yeah, you're right, I'm a total loser, like, or it brings up stuff from your past or really starts to challenge your belief system and what you have come to believe and know to be true, which if you've listened to any of our other podcasts, sometimes there's a glass ceiling there and we think that the ceiling's there and it's not. And so maybe they're challenging that. Whatever this information, propaganda, whatever it is that's coming at you, you have some sort of attachment to it. And so typically when you have, not typically, I would say every single time you have an emotional reaction, it's because you have an attachment to it, right? So first of all, you get to take a look at, hey, that really kind of flared me up. That kind of got me. Okay, why? Right? Like that's kind of where my brain goes first, is like, wow, why did that just really like get in there and get into me? What is it saying about me? So a lot of time the message that's being presented is being presented in order to just really strike at that emotional side of you, right? Like to really get you, just pique your interest, get your attention, make you feel something, to get you engaged. And then it's really quick to pull you into either one of those poles like we were talking about, right? Instead of us searching to go to the mountain to get that perspective. It's like one of the ways in which we can just get distracted from actually finding out what is true.
Right.
And that comes because of our emotional reaction, because of that trigger that happens, because of that mirror that gets put up in front of us of like, well, I can't be wrong about this, right? And then we can get pulled that way on that emotional side of things instead of really taking a breath and look, and then where it's headed here after this, which is the next step. But I really want to continue. I want to get your perspective on this emotional side of it. But then it can, in my experience anyway, once again, because I'm a feeler, and so emotions come into play a lot for me. But when it's just strictly emotion and we don't bring in some of the logical checking to be able to really discern whether or not it's true or not.
Right.
That we just lean on that one thing, like, oh, no, this is the way that I feel. It has to be true because I feel this way. And then you become really passionate about it and you march forward with that platform.
Right.
Like you were talking about, like, and you just grow your voice amongst that instead of stopping to see if that really is true and fits for you, because all you've done is just gone with your emotional reaction.
Right. Yeah, and I think to simplify it is the fear, right? So is we become afraid. We feel the energy of fear. It affects us on some level where it triggers us, or it incites us, or it alerts us, or it awakens us into anger, which is a fear-based emotion, or it triggers us into a angry or love-based emotion, and usually we're dealing with, as we've always talked about, either fear or love. And so a lot of what's going on in the media and a lot of what's going on in the world right now is very, very fear-based. America, the North America, the American continents, the Americas, the world, Europe, China, it's all, everybody's in the grip of this fear.
Yes.
And then there's anger, like take the example of masking right now, like wearing masks, and how divided and how divisive the topic of wearing a mask can be.
Yep.
And people are running around trying to find evidence to support, well, I don't have to wear one, or this is why you have to wear one. And anytime somebody posts something on either side of that equation, it incites you. For those that are on the pro mask, the minute somebody posts something or a picture comes up with people aren't wearing masks, like I saw a post today with Sylvester Stallone and his 3 daughters, and he's saying, he's like, we took our masks off real quick so we could take this photo. I'm like, holy hell, dude. Like, you don't have to explain it.
Right.
But then I think you do.
Yeah.
Because some people are going to be like, oh my gosh. And then they're going to troll him.
Right.
And tell him how wrong and how bad he is because they're setting a bad example and he's, blah, blah, blah. And so, like, that's what I'm talking about. And that's what you're talking about is that fear emotion. And so then we run to these platforms. We run to these places where we can try and get information to support us one way or another.
Right.
And so we're divided. Instead of removing yourself to that hill, calming yourself, stepping back, looking at the big picture, we as a species have survived for millions of years. And the odds of you dying from the coronavirus at this point are low, if you haven't already. And I don't mean to be cruel and insensitive.
Right.
That's not my point. Could you still? Yes. Is it possible that I could still be taken by it? Yes. Who knows? But the point is that if I step back and look at the big picture, I can stay calm and I can go, okay, when I travel, I definitely need to be wearing a mask to protect myself. Am I at risk? Well, I don't have a lot of the health issues a lot of people have. So I'm a lower risk, but I still need to take precautions. So then we start to use this healthy, value-based, love-based energy of wash your hands. Don't touch your face. If you're sick, stay home. If you go out in public where there's a group or high density of people, wear a mask. then we start to get moving in more of a discerning voice rather than, as you were putting it earlier, the fear-based of, oh my gosh, nobody's wearing a mask. I hate them all. You're a bunch of idiots. Or, oh my gosh, you're all wearing masks. You're just sheep. You're so lame.
You're a bunch of idiots.
Like, you're a bunch of idiots.
It's like both sides.
No, they're both. It's a 6 and it's a 9. You've got to figure out and navigate that path for you. For me, my path is, my truth is, I'm going to be okay. I'm not stressing out about this. I'm 55. I'm in good shape. I'm healthy. But also, if it's my time, it's going to be my time. But that's my big picture. That's not, doesn't mean it's the right big picture. That's Dean's big picture. Maybe not Kate's, but it's Dean's.
Right. And just to kind of reiterate, you were able to come to that conclusion by taking a step back, not getting emotionally sucked into it, getting information, being able to like bring in your own personal experience where you know you're at with your health and, you know, any of those other factors that could come into play. And then I think for me, like another thing that I would bring into is I'm just not trying to like really tick anybody off, right? So if it's more respectful to have one on, then great. If a establishment says you can't come in here and I want to go in there, then I'm going to be wearing a mask. But other than that, I'm like you. Like I'm really healthy. I really try to take care of myself. I don't have any like preconditions that would make me super susceptible. And we work in a teeny tiny little office. Like I don't see more than 50 people in a day. So
we don't have we don't have big volumes of people coming through. So it is. So that aside, you know, so what we're talking about, what you're referring to has a lot to do, you know, with, am I following my truth?
Right.
So we talk about discernment is when your heart and your head are balanced.
Right, exactly.
And that's how we determine it. So you're talking, when you first started out, you're saying, instead of going off of the fear feeling,
right, and
just going off, well, this is what I feel, or this is what I feel to be true, or the love feeling only,
right, then
that's not healthy. But when we can add in the knowledge or the intelligence or the information, which is our head, and then we bring those two together, then we navigate better through these trials that we're going through. And it's hard to hear, you know, I love coaching. And I love being a coach. Coaching water polo has been a great thing for me. I've had to take a bit of a sabbatical because my schedule is so busy right now. But I love coaching because you can inspire people. And you can inspire these kids especially. You go in and you give them the best speech you've ever given them, and they will perform on a level that they never thought they could perform. And the only reason I love coaching is because I had great coaches. Right, I had great coaches that could just get me so stoked, like they could get me so fired up before a water polo match, or before a swim meet, or before a baseball or softball tournament. That going into it, like I could break bats over my head. Yeah, I can swim across this pool in 2 seconds. Like I can make a shot from clear across the pool. That type of energy that they just get you amped up. Well, that same type of energy, people, is what is at each of those pedestals and podiums and platforms that we're talking about. You get these people up there that are great orators, that are great verbalizers, that are great speakers and very passionate, and I see them and they have a way of whipping a crowd into a frenzy, and then people are like, oh my gosh, they're right. I can feel it. It feels so true. It feels so true. But they're also at times disseminating or sending out false information or information that's partially true. And I've been accused of that. I've been accused of putting out false information myself. And I stand by all my information. You can call it false. I will still stand by my information. But you've got to determine whether it's false or not. You do, listener. You're the one that has to listen to what we're saying and go, okay, it sounds true. I believe that what they're saying is true, but I need to be making that decision on my own. And that's important. And I believe that's where you were heading, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So then we bring in the logic side of it, right? Which for me, because I'm an emotional feeler, I'm an emotional person, the logic side of it can come in and really do some checking for me, right? Be able to kind of help keep me a little bit more grounded and be able to really start to, like you put, bring my head and my heart into balance. Because if my heart's just been swayed, right, and it's really easy to say, oh gosh, this has to be true because of how I'm feeling, when really that's just the emotional pull that's happening because we're emotional beings, that to be able to take some space and fact check, go actually look through different sources from multiple angles, because once again, it is a 6 and it is a 9, right?
They're both right.
They're both right. Then you're able to paint more of a broad picture to be able to discern what actually is true.
Right.
And in my experience thus far in my life, it's somewhere in the middle. Right. Of what is actually true. But let's take it to the extreme on the logic side of it, shall we? So if you're coming in just with only facts and figures and not really tapping into the heart piece of it, then you can also easily be pulled to one side or another. And especially if you get pretty, what's the right word here? Righteous in your facts and in your statistics.
Self-righteous,
and in your ability to actually find the quote unquote truth. I have many people in my life that are very, very logical, right? They don't bring in kind of dropping down into the heart and feeling it out as well, which we need both of them.
Right.
And one of my favorite arguments to come back in these situations is, hey, what outcome do you want? I can find statistics that will prove either way.
That is the key.
Right? You can find literally anything that you want to find. Like if you're going just straight facts and logic and figures, like you can prove quite literally almost everything.
Yeah. It's like that old joke about the guy interviewing accountants, and he pulls one guy in and he's like, what's 2 + 2? 4. Another guy, what's 2 + 2? 4. And he brings the third guy, what's 2 + 2? The guy's like, what do you want it to be? You're hired.
Exactly.
And that is the truth. I mean,
Yes.
a lot of the statistical information is, we can say you can't argue with statistics, but I don't agree with that. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can argue with results. And I think there's a difference between the two.
Right.
Because sometimes the statistics that we get aren't always accurate.
Right.
And I see, one of those is we're seeing so much information coming out right now about the coronavirus, mm-hmm. and how much of the information that we're getting is contrary to the statistics that we're being given.
Right. All of the information seems to be contrary, from one day to the next.
But yet you throw the numbers out there, and the numbers, people are like, no, this is the numbers. The numbers are telling us that this is what's happening. But then you're not taking into consideration all these other things, like this whole concept of testing. Mm-hmm. And so we're saying, oh my gosh, this is on the rise, and this is happening, and this is more and more people are being tested, and this is how many people are being tested. And it's like, well, gosh, if they're being tested, they must be sick, and this mm-hmm. is how many people, and pretty soon there's so much confusion because the statistics themselves may not be accurate. And then the other thing that you have to play into it is that the almighty dollar.
Right. Exactly.
And how much people are willing to fudge the lines in order to make money, make money, and then feed that into the statistical information. And then your statistics become contaminated. Mm-hmm. And so then our statistical information, I think that's the disservice that's being done in the world right now, is that a lot of the factual statistics that we're getting aren't always essentially accurate. Mm-hmm. And again, I will stand by this information because I've done my research,
right.
and not all of those statistics we're getting are accurate. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because people are chasing the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's where we have to look at the results rather than the statistics, and we start looking at the results. And like we talked about in our very, very, very first podcast, and we really were putting it out there, it's like, look around. Make a decision off of what you see around you. Don't make a decision off what people are telling you. Mm-hmm. And I stand by that too.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Well, and then the other piece that comes in really, really interesting for me right now is the ability technologically that we have to be able to alter what is in perception to be real and true. And I'm talking like in photographs, in videos.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Please, yes.
On this, and don't lose this.
Okay.
So this was like 1984. So 1984, I'm in Sheridan, Wyoming, and I'm on a 2-year vacation. Wink, wink, nod, nod to those of you that get it. And I'm on this 2-year vacation, and another guy had just gotten back from his 2-year vacation, right? And he had gone to Philadelphia. And so it was funny to me how what we did is he had a photography studio. And so we would go in and we would superimpose our pictures. So we would take a picture of us on top of a hilltop with nothing but blue sky behind us. And so I have a picture of myself standing next to the Rocky Balboa statue in Philadelphia.
In the 80s?
In 84.
Wow.
So, I mean, this was even way back before digital stuff. This was super cutting edge. So I get this black and white picture, and it shows me on the steps in Philadelphia where they used to have his statue at the top of these big steps that he climbed. And I'm standing next to Rocky. I've never been there, never seen it, never been to Philly my whole entire life. But I have a picture that puts me there. And so I just had to tell that because, I mean, even clear back then, there was a way to make that happen.
Well, and like everybody knows, I mean, if this is news to you, I just want to hug you and be like, how do I live your life? Because I wish it wasn't news to me, but just the capacity that we have to alter all things and to make them as if they, and in like literally right in front of your eyes.
Right.
Like not even
audio files.
Yes.
And digital
videos
fingerprints, footprint, digital footprints, like where you've been, what you've done. People can alter all that stuff.
Yeah, that is so crazy when you really start to dig into this, because how, like, in search for truth, what you see is often like a pretty big indicator of, okay, I can see this, clearly this has to be true, when that isn't even on the table anymore.
Right.
Like it just isn't, because quite literally anyone can say, oh no, this is what happened, and show you things and be like, holy crap, that's what happened, and it be completely false, like 100% a lie, just to instigate emotion into you, to be able to sway you to their agenda, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Down the rabbit hole we go, right? So in this quest for logic for this side of things, like, it really does take that bigger go up on the hill, like you were saying with Gandhi, to be able to bring in both of these sides. And then I would really, I guess the next piece of this is to take a minute, right? Like, we're so reactive to try to like just boom, find what it is and chase after it and add your flag to that campaign, right? Like when we have a minute, like take a minute, sit with it, meditate on it, allow it to go in your head and in your heart and become in balance with one another. Like, we're so just quick to react, I guess, is what I'm trying to articulate here. Yeah,
we get reactive out of fear, and that's how you know when you're there, is if you're in a reactive mode. If you're scrolling, right? If you're scrolling through social media and you see something that incites you, and not only does it incite you, it incites you to react, then you're in a fear-based place. That's where you need to walk away from it, walk with it for a minute, make a decision, then go from there. But that's not what most people will do. They'll immediately respond. They'll immediately react. And I can't tell you how intoxicating that is.
Oh, yes.
And I'm only speaking from experience. Like, I am that. I can get so caught up in that. I can get a text message that will send me through the roof based upon the traumas that I've experienced in my life. And so all of a sudden I get a text message, and my imagination is running wild, and it's jumping to conclusions, and it's starting to wind up, and then I'm starting to agitate those around me, and I get them up in a fury, and I get them all twisted because I need people to support me.
Yep.
And then I create this big giant mess. Now we take that small little microcosm of my life and we blow it up to a national and a global That's exactly what's happening. It's exactly what's happening right now globally and nationally is we're getting these messages, we're agitating those around us so we can feel supported, and then we're all in a fear-based reactive energy.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of pressure put on everybody to choose. Like, where do you stand? I need
if
to
you're
know
not
where
with
you
me,
stand.
you're against me.
Yeah, to make a choice and join the cacophonous choir, right? Instead of like being able to make space and hold someone in a position of, hey, like I would be just thrilled and feel so much respect and be in awe of someone if I were to hear them say, hey, I don't even really know where I stand on that issue right now. I'm still trying to figure it out. What? That's amazing. But what they're going to get is, oh, you must, whatever. I don't even know what to, like you must be this kind of a person, and start just throwing fireballs of hate at them because they haven't polarized, right? When, once again, probably the truth lands somewhere in the middle.
Well, and the reason why people do that is because if you're not with me, you're against me. And if you're against me, then you think I'm wrong. So that's really what drives that, is if somebody has a different opinion. And that's one of the biggest issues we're having in our world right now, is people can't have different opinions or they're shamed.
Yes.
The minute somebody has a different opinion than you immediately get shamed, or you shame them. And next thing you know, we're posting things and we're shaming them on social media. We're shaming them through text messages. We're ostracizing them. We're cutting them off. We're cutting them out. All because we take their belief system as a message that they think we're wrong. Instead of stepping back and going, well, shit, I am so glad you have a different opinion. Because the more opinions we have, the better decision we make. But they're just opinions. They're not truths.
Right.
They're just opinions.
Perspectives.
So if I can just value your opinion, you don't have to be right or wrong. They're just an opinion. And somewhere in the middle of all of our opinions is the truth.
Right.
So let's come together. You bring your opinion to the table. I'll bring my opinion to the table. And let's kind of mash it out until we find out the truth. But that's not what we're doing.
Right. Right. It has more to do with what that says about me, instead of, that's an interesting perspective
Of yours.
yours. Yeah. Like we personalize it instead of just allowing them to stand in whatever it is that they hold in their perspective and what they've found to be true for them. And then that's the next step, right? The bigger step is to be able to bring it all together in collaboration to create solutions that will be helpful and help better our societies and move us forward as a species and as a world, we could start small and just grow it and grow it and grow it.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of just pointing fingers at everybody and saying, no, I'm right, no, you're wrong, and I'm terrified if that's not true. And so I'm just going to keep beating my drum so that...
Until I can get a rally around me.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I think that's the interesting thing, is because we see it on so many platforms right now where, religion, I think there's a lot of religion and a lot of anger around religions. And so I'll see people that'll be, as you put it, they'll leave the religion, but they can't leave the religion alone. And so they'll try and come in and shame people that are still of that religion or of that belief system. We see it with gender issues and people's stances on gender issues, and they may have a different opinion, whether it be pro or opposed to the stance that people have. Whatever it is,
right.
but we're not allowing people to have their opinions anymore, and that to me is the scariest world that we live in. Like I get a biggest kick out of people that'll walk around and go, "This person's a fascist, and this person's a fascist, and this person's a fascist." But if you don't agree with me, you're bad, and we're going to shame the shit out of you because you should be this way and you should be that. No, you're the fascist. That's a fascist thinking. A fascist thinking is running around telling everybody else they're fascist. That's a fascist. That's how you know you're a fascist.
So it's a pretty good litmus, I guess.
Right? If you're running around calling somebody a fascist, it's because you're a fascist. And the minute you start running around, start saying, well, you have to believe like me, and we have to all feel the same way. And if you don't believe this way, you're a fascist. And that's the part that's, you get mad about it. Okay. Well, do I have a problem with fascists? No. No, if you want to be a fascist, if you want to be a capitalist, if you want to be a communist, you have your opinions. You have your opinions. I don't have to agree with them, but I will listen and I will honor what your opinion is, but don't run around shaming other people because they think differently and feel different than you do. You don't have to like it. You don't have to live it.
Right.
But for heaven's sake, stop beating people up over it.
Right. And in fact, it is beautiful to have many different opinions and different sides so that we can come to solution.
We're always preaching diversity.
Yes.
But yet we want to stomp out diversity.
Isn't it interesting?
It's like we want this world to be this diverse rainbow of colors and religions and philosophies, but don't unless it's the same as mine.
But it's either this or that, not this diverse, beautiful expression.
It's like so funny to me. It's like, well, if you're Muslim, you're wrong. If you're Christian, you're wrong. But hey, we want everybody to be okay. We want everybody to have their own religion and everybody, peace, love, da-da-da-da-da. I'll put my flags up. I'll do all this stuff. But if you don't agree with me, you're a fascist. You're, blah, blah, blah. It's like, wait a minute. Are you listening to yourself? You're becoming a part of the issue.
Right. So to become a part of the solution seeking is to really dig into your discernment, to really figure out what it is with your head and your heart, what you feel to be true, and then come together in a unified ability to be able to hear different opinions and perspectives without personalizing it, with allowing people to be able to stand in their truth without it diminishing you and your light.
Right.
And the more that we can all do that together, then the more beautiful and brilliant and diverse our world can be, and we can actually accomplish something. We can actually move forward together in progression instead of just pointing the fingers, standing on our towers saying, no, you're wrong.
Or surrounding others' towers.
Exactly.
Yeah, and going, why aren't you over here?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I support that. Yeah. And I think that's using that, as you said, we have to really get our own truth. And I think the part that was so interesting to me about Gandhi, and I didn't get to go into him as much as we could have, and that's okay. We can always talk about it another time. But the interesting thing about Gandhi was he was never afraid of being alone in his positions. Yeah. He was never afraid. I think about one time in his autobiography, he's talking about a time where, as he's a lawyer, right? So he's actually a barrister or a lawyer, formally trained. He's working in South Africa, and at that time, it was whites only in the travel coaches, and if you weren't white, then you had to travel in the baggage coaches. So he purchased the ticket, and of course it said Mahatma Gandhi, barrister. So they immediately gave him a ticket into coach because they just assumed, right? So then he shows up into coach, and they're trying to get him to move into the back, and he's like, no, I paid for this ticket. And so he goes and he sits down, and the porter comes along and starts asking, telling him, you've got to move because I want to sit down. And Gandhi's like, no, I'm not going to move. I paid for this place. So he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing Gandhi till finally he's like, okay, fine, you can have my seat, and I'm going to go sit on the stairs outside the back of the car. So he goes and he sits on the stairs, and the porter then, after sitting there for a period of time, decides he wants to have a cigarette. So he goes to Gandhi and he goes, hey, I want to have a cigarette. I want to sit out here and smoke. You need to move back into that seat.
What?
And Gandhi's like, no, I'm not going to move. You move me here, you're not moving me again. And so the porter starts yelling at him and starts obscene language and starts yelling. And Gandhi grabs a hold of the rail and he wouldn't let go. And the guy starts to literally try to move Gandhi. And Gandhi won't move. And the guy starts to beat him. He's starting to beat him. And Gandhi's taking this beating. Pretty soon he's taking such a beating, Gandhi said, that the other people in the coach, in the car, finally asked the porter, they're like pleading, like, stop, what are you doing? Stop, they finally get involved. And so the porter has to go sit down in Gandhi's seat, and then he doesn't get his cigarette. And I think about that so much, about how Gandhi didn't yell, he didn't scream, he didn't fight, he didn't punch, he didn't... hey, this guy's being a jerk, and does anybody see? And he didn't try and get nuts about it. He just stood his ground. And I think about how lonely that moment must have felt, sitting on the back steps, looking at all the white people sitting in their seats, and him sitting on the back steps. But he wasn't afraid to be alone, and he wasn't afraid to be in that position. He wasn't lonely, but he was alone. And I think that's where we have to go when we're talking about really using your discerning voice. You have to be willing to be alone at times, not lonely. That's different. You don't have to be lonely. That's a choice you're making. But to be alone is also a choice that you're making. But in that moment that you're alone, you're really with your truth. So you're not lonely. You're with your truth. And that's why I say, people are like, I hate this your truth stuff. Well, I'm sorry. It is your truth.
Yeah,
and the fact that you hate your truth stuff is your truth. So, ta-da. But the point being is, you've got to be okay standing alone and doing your thing. And then you have to be okay when people are standing alone doing their thing and leaving them alone.
And perhaps that would be like one of the ways to know whether or not you're in your truth, is asking yourself, am I willing to stand alone in this?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. Like that bit of it is super, super powerful,
Yeah.
I think.
He's such an amazing man. I hope you all read him.
Yeah, well, now I intend to. Well, you guys, thank you so much for listening. We hope that that you take some of these principles and the things that we've talked about and put them to use in your life to see if they ring true for you, and that you can figure out in all of the cacophony where it is that your heart and your head and everything that is inside of you anchors into what is true for you, and that you can be a part of the solution-seeking culture that can help us progress and move our species and this planet towards more love and light and peace. So with that, we love you, and we will chat at you in the next podcast. Have a wonderful day.